Hey, in this video we're going to be talking about Unity's controller mapping. The built-in input system for Unity. I'm using Unity 2019 and things are changing. I will say that the input mapping in Unity has never been very good. It's good enough for the most part, but if you wanted to make a bigger project, it would usually be a good idea to go to the asset store and buy a plugin. Unfortunately, I think they're all anyone worth using is a paid plugin. But I'll show you what Unity does, what it has built in, and things are changing in Unity 2020. There is a new input system, and it is good, I guess. It's just very complex. It's a pretty big jump from what we have, and changes the way you have to do a lot of things. So I don't really recommend jumping into that right now. So that's why I'm showing you here. So if you go to edit and you go to your project settings, you should be able to get to the input manager and expand the axes, and it will show you all of the input that's already mapped. So by default, we have horizontal and vertical movement. It's mapped to like WASD. You can see some of the things it does here. It's called horizontal. You've probably used this before in other projects. Left and right arrow keys, or A and D to work with this axis. So it's not just movement axes, but also buttons that are treated as axes in this. If you look at Fire 1, this is left control or mouse button 0. And you'll also notice that there's another Fire 1, so you can have duplicate names in order to put other controls onto the same input mapping. So here you have a joystick button as well. So the way that Unity talks about joysticks is maybe a little misleading for people that are not used to it. A joystick in this is a gamepad. So it's talking about a complete controller device. It used to be that joysticks were a name that was interchangeable with a gamepad. So just think of it that way. Joysticks have buttons. So Unity uses this array of mappings, and if you're going to be adding or changing these, make sure that you have enough to work with. So if you say it starts at 18, maybe I need a few more. Let me do 22. You'll see that it duplicates the last one, cancel. So these cancels are all the same. You can also duplicate in the middle. Let's say I want to make another Fire 1. Let me do this one, Fire 1. Duplicate array element. Be careful, because in some versions of Unity it doesn't add an extra one, and it'll knock off the one from the bottom. But this looks like it did the right thing. So now that I've duplicated Fire 1, if I wanted to make this like work for multiplayer, I would want to make this specific to one joystick. So I would want to change the joy num to that specific joystick. Let's say this is going to be the fire button for player 1. I also want to make the name clear that is for player 1. So Fire 1 player 1, for example. And then I also need to change this. This positive button, joystick button 0, is still referring to all joysticks. I want it to be specifically joystick 1 button 0. And so I should go through all of them, create more mappings for the different actions that are in my game, like jump player 1, jump player 2, etc. So just make sure you have enough space in this array before you start messing around with those. Alright, so the the button 0, is not very descriptive. Who knows what button that actually is on your physical gamepad? You will have to look up a mapping from the physical gamepad to this button 0. You can Google for that. I have something here on the Unity wiki. You can find this one easily looking for Unity Xbox 360, and this holds for all, generally all Xbox-like controllers. So you can scroll down and there are some tables with the descriptions here. There's also an image, which is helpful. So you can see that there are lots of buttons on this controller, and Unity will refer to these the x-axis and the y-axis. And then after x and y, it goes into numbering the axis. So axis 3 involves the triggers, which is weird a little bit, but it lets you get analog data, like maybe they're only pressed halfway down. 4th and 5th are on the right joystick, 6th and 7th are on the D-pad, and then you've got button labels. So button 0 happens to be the A button. Problem with how Unity has been doing it all these years is that this mapping is very inconsistent. It's even inconsistent with other operating systems. So you can see for a Mac, using a driver that makes it work for a Mac, these mappings are all totally different. On Linux, they're again different. Different axes for the triggers, for example. It's very frustrating having to do platform-specific work in a game engine that otherwise abstracts all those details. And this is different from, say, a PlayStation controller. So where like button 0 might be A there, it might be somewhere else on the face. Even though these controllers look very similar, the mapping is not exactly right. It's a little harder to find a nice mapping for the PS4 controller out there, but you can find it. What is it? X is the one at the bottom, so that's joystick button 1. Square, which is on the left, is joystick button 0, so that's pretty weird. Usually when we try to abstract these, we give them more agnostic names. In the new input system, they give the face buttons names that are like button south for the bottom one and button west for the left one. So that works out. So you'll have to do some referencing here and some additional work putting together these mappings for your game. And that's how this system works. When you use it in code, use it just like we always have, referring to this name for the axis or the button that you're trying to get information from. Alright, I will see you in the next video.